So, like an idiot, instead of just recording the next video immediately, because I had, set up how I was going to do these, and I had gone over them real quick. But no, I stopped, and now several days later, I'm coming back. I went and listened to the last 1 minute of the other video, which means I went over. I know I went over the entire prestige class. And the last minute of the video, the part I wanted to check was, did I talk about Saren? And I started to. So we know that Saren Colmer was created to be the iconic face of fear. And by iconic, I don't mean typical. I just mean when you think face of fear, Saren should be the first thing that comes to mind. Leaving off on that real quick, I used to have an easy board message board, and when easy board turned into Yuku, my easy board disappeared. It's gone. I can't. It doesn't exist anymore. And I used to have my game material archived on my old role playing board. That board system went down years ago, and that's gone. And I think I have all of my stuff from there saved, but it's on my desktop computer at home in Arizona. So when I went to look up my Faces of Fear, my old Prestige class, I don't have it here on my desktop. Luckily, I did find it online. And all the abilities that I mentioned were exactly right, except that they did have one final ability. Their actual highest level ability, their seventh level ability, was they became immune to critical hits, nausea, weakness, fatigue, exhaustion, and all kinds of stuff. They had so mutilated themselves that pain meant nothing anymore. Bleeding meant nothing anymore. They bled all the time, whenever they wanted to. This picture actually ties into what we're going to talk about today, and that is the transformation of the Faces of Fear from a prestige class into an organization. And this, I'll get to the picture in a moment. So I had this Faces of Fear prestige class, and I had made up Saren Colmer. And I started making, I had a couple adventures that I made. The first time I ever used PowerPoint, I think it was the very first time I ever used PowerPoint, I used it to make an adventure. Each slide was basically just listing what was going to happen next in the adventure and what have you. And so Saren Colmer became an inhabitant of Windhaven. This is the old version of Windhaven, the one where it's the city on a port city that's filled with crime and evil and all kinds of stuff. All of my villains have been to Windhaven. It's a more wretched hive of scum and villainy you'd never find. I probably butchered that quote, but that's fine because I'm a Star Trek fan. The So she basically prowled the back alleys of Windhaven, and she had two pet Crenshaw. And this was both because I needed extra threats to be alongside of her, and also probably Harley Quinn's Jackals from the animated Batman series were an influence on that. But I came to realize when I was making this adventure that she needs more than just herself, because in game she's like a 16-year-old girl. She has these powers, she's a cleric and she's a face of fear, so she's got all this that going for her, but on her own, she's probably not going to be enough to take on a party of PCs, and she doesn't seem that important. So I wanted to up her importance, and the best way to up someone's importance is to give them henchmen. And so I decided what I wanted for henchmen were a swordsman, someone to actually, be the frontline guy, and then a wizard, someone to be the backline guy. And then Saren could be in, sort of this mid ranger who can go up and fight hand to hand if need be, or stand back and sling spells if need be. And at the time, I just left it at that: swordsman and wizard, and then we have our own little group now. And the reason why they followed Saren is because Saren would have these visions of the face of fear, and it would be like this dreamlike state, and the face of fear would sort of prophesy towards her. And so she would get these messages. Oh, give me just one sec here. All right. My nose is all stuffed up, so I had to blow my nose real quick. I can breathe easy now. And I'm sure you're all very happy that I told you this. So, This is when that mythos of Saren as the mistress started. So I decided she had had these visions, and so she was sort of like a prophet. She was the servant of the face of fear, and both the swordsman and the wizard bought into that philosophy, theology, whatever you want to call it, that cult, and now serve with her. And that was good, but it wasn't quite great enough because when Monty Cook's Tallest came out, he there was this idea of the chaos cults. I don't remember if I've talked about chaos cults before, but basically they're called chaos cults and they cause their job basically in the overall scheme of things is to cause chaos. And one of those chaos cults was the Ebon Hand. Now, the Ebon Hand, Monty created it, and it was basically a cult that loved deformity. People who were born with deformities were said to have been touched by the Ebon Hand, and they were considered blessed. And in the book, if you go through their like entrance requirements and actually join their group, which no PC should ever do, but maybe they have this final rite, and when you finally accomplish it, you roll on a table, and it gives you some sort of mutation, deformity, or something like that. Like you can get a gigantic mouth. Your mouth will grow to just this huge size, and then you gain a bite attack, or your skin would like thicken to the point where you had like natural armor. And when I read this, I thought I loved the idea of chaos cults. By the way, all of them are very different, and all of them have their own little shtick. And I liked the Ebon Hand's philosophy, but actually, when I first read it, I thought this doesn't make any sense. And that is when the Faces of Fear as a splinter cult came up. I'll go more into depth on this idea when I talk about Saren, but essentially what happened was I decided that when Saren came to Windhaven, oh, just to mention also, Windhaven and Tallest had so many things in common that they're essentially the same city. I took large portions of Tallest and just shoved it right into Windhaven because I had the same ideas, but I hadn't put as much effort and detail into them as Monty did. So why not steal his work? So she had come into Windhaven and fallen in with this cult, the Ebon Hand. But when she started having these visions of the face of fear, she discovered that their philosophy was misguided. And she came up with her own, well, didn't come up with her own philosophy. The face of fear had given her the correct philosophy. And so she started her own splinter group. And of course, she got all of two other guys to follow her. Luckily, those two guys are really awesome at what they do. One, I'll go over the wizard first. His name is Warrick. He's an elf, and he's in love with Saren. And Saren knows he's in love with her, but Saren doesn't care because Saren doesn't love him back. And actually, Saren likes the fact that she can kind of torture him that way. And I can't do a whole video on Warrick because he's the guy who has the least development. Essentially, just know that he buys into the part of the reason he buys into Saren's philosophy is because he's deeply in love with her. And then we have this guy. This picture is Garrett. He's the swordsman. And this is actually a picture of a guy named, I think his name is Gouda or Goda. And he is from Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex Second Gig, a show that I watched on Toonami. Came on Saturday nights, I think. Friday night, Saturday night. And when I saw his face, for a while when I was in undergrad college, I had put aside the Faces of Fear. Early in college, is when I put a lot of development into it, and then it kind of fell aside as my projects do. And then in my junior year, possibly senior year, right in that area, I saw this guy on Standalone Complex, and I said, "Oh my God, it's a Face of Fear! Look at that!" Now you might be wondering, based on the old description of them, where they cut the insides of their face and everything, he doesn't look like that. But actually, what he had done and what Garrett had done is he had removed the skin behind his ear and down along under his jawline and then up around the backside of his head so that he could pull it open kind of like a flap. His face just kind of hangs down the left side of his face. In this picture, it's the left side, but actually with Garrett, it's reversed. This would be like him looking in a mirror. So it would just hang down, and it's only attached on the right side of his face. And the reason why it's all stretched out like that is because when he's not using his Face of Fear powers, he pulls the skin back and kind of just stitches it shut with a couple stitches. And each time he does that, he keeps having to pull his face further and further back to find good skin to stitch. Luckily, I have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about in his video, so I can talk about him a little bit here too. Where were we going with this? Oh, the Faces of Fear as an organization. So what they do is they believe in, contrary to the Ebon Hand, which believes in deformity, the Faces of Fear believe in mutilation. It's not that you were born that way, it's that you were born normal and decided to screw yourself up. That shows a greater commitment to the philosophy of the Face of Fear and also the Ebon Hand. And, oh gosh, I can't wait till that video. I keep talking about the other videos I'm going to do instead of actually talking about the topic at hand, when I should actually be studying for a test right now. So you have Garrett, you have Warrick, and now you have Saren. They have this interplay. Garrett is actually difficult for me. I'm still trying to figure out why he is a part of the Faces of Fear. As a person, it doesn't make sense that he buys into the Face of Fear philosophy. So it doesn't really make sense that he would follow Saren because he actually believes in her cause. There's no doubt that what he has done, his mutilation, has given him extra powers. So it's not that he doesn't believe that in the philosophy at all, but he's not the kind of guy who would care enough about a philosophical difference between the two leaders to choose to leave the group. And he's also not a guy. I mean, he would most likely stay with the Ebon Hand because they're a larger, more powerful organization. He's kind of opportunistic, and that was a weird way to say that. And so he's going to stay with the group that's bigger and stronger and better. So something's going on, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. Something has gone on that he decided to follow Saren into another group. And he's also, because he's the guy who's least sort of tied in, of course, of all three of them, the least tied into the philosophy, he's the guy that you can see working with outside people. He hires himself out as a mercenary every once in a while. And so I was actually trying to tie the Faces of Fear into the Fangs of the Worm. Saren would never work with the Fangs of the Worm. She already has her own, uber evil power that she worships, so she doesn't need the Akane demon dragon. Garrett, on the other hand, would work with them just fine, because whatever gets him more power is all right in his book. This is like Garrett video. We will have a different picture when we get to Garrett's video. So what do the Faces of Fear focus on? They do like to spread fear, they like to undermine confidence, and they like to mutilate people. The only thing, the next step down from mutilating yourself is mutilating other people. You're kind of sharing the gospel with them in that way. And so what they'll do is they love to capture, like kidnap guardsmen or I'm air quoting here, politicians, like the noblemen or the mayor or whoever's in charge of particular, like the guild leader. They like to kidnap people of influence. You can't go too high up the chain. If they started trying to kidnap, the mayor of Windhaven, they in old Trocare, they would have a ton of crap coming down on them because he's a very important guy, and so he has a lot of resources available, and people would be trying to get him back. And since there's only three of them, they have to stick to lower level people. But what they'll do is they'll kidnap them, they'll mutilate them, they'll kill them, or sometimes they won't kill them. We're unsure which is worse. And then, put the bodies back out where it's going to be discovered and make a big impact. And that's sort of how they're operating right now. It's not what they ultimately would like to do, but it's where they're stuck. Now, I keep saying that there's only the three members. Those are the three main members. There are some associate members, one of which, actually I could say two of which, have names and are semi-important. But the rest of them, you can just say that there's like a dozen associated cultists who are part of the group but aren't really important. So they're mooks. They're the people that are going to get killed real fast if the PCs attack them. All right, we'll talk more about this in the next video, and which of course I'll record some days after this. Bye bye.